Thanks, Glenn, and thanks for having me. And it's great to see a couple familiar faces on here. My name is Beth, and I am an alcoholic. My sobriety date is August 1st of 2017. That was a day that I didn't know that I had a loving God that would separate me from alcohol. Before I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, though, even before I picked up my first drink, I performed, pretended, and tried to perfect making everything look okay on the outside. I ran from people, problems, and definitely peace. I knew how to indulge in pity, problems, and pride. But I didn't know any of that. It was just the only normal life that I knew. So I grew up in this household with an alcoholic father and a mother who's mentally unstable and tried to commit suicide a couple times before I'm 3. None of that makes me an alcoholic. It might have warped some of my old ideas and beliefs of who I am, but it does not make me an alcoholic. I was very much like the actor leading the double life, presenting my stage character, wanting to enjoy a certain reputation, even though in my heart I didn't know it. I remember being pinged once when somebody wrote something in my high school yearbook about how I'm able to just overcome what everyone else thinks of me. And I remember feeling that hitting my heart. Because the truth was, I was concerned about what other people thought of me, but I couldn't verbalize it at that time. I didn't know that my behaviors and my thinking inside my head, my fearful, squirmy feelings, were the things that were keeping me in the bondage of self at that time. I remember just thinking that's a lie, but I didn't know how to formalize that and put that into words. I had no idea that what I suffered from even before I picked up a drink was that unmanageability that our big book talks about. But I do know at 13 when I went to that Italian wedding with my family and my cousin's marrying into that Italian family, there's lots of Italians in New Jersey, and obviously I'm the Irish Dutch girl with the pale skin. When I picked up that first drink, I had that feeling of, all of a sudden I feel taller because I'm only 5'2". I feel so much prettier. I feel thinner. I feel funnier. And I'm able to relate to everyone. Whereas before, I'd been so stuck in my head before I took that drink that there was no relating to anyone. And I had no idea that that was part of the unmanageability of the disease of the spiritual malady that we have, that bondage of self. I didn't know that I had fears of being not good enough, not valued, not respected. Feelings of squirminess when it came to feeling powerless, which I very much am powerless over alcohol, but lack of power is my dilemma, and I'm always looking for some kind of power outside of me. I didn't know that I could feel rejection where nobody else could see it, that I was afraid of being vulnerable, that I'm afraid to speak my truth, that I had a lot of old ideas and behaviors that drove my thinking and behavior, but I don't know that because I haven't been to Alcoholics Anonymous yet. I live life through a set of lenses that bring up these defects of character, or what I like to call defenses, and I don't know that. But I pick up that drink, and that drink picks up me. I don't understand that I have an allergy, and then once I consume that first drink demanded a second drink, the second drink demanded a third. I didn't know that after I went home and felt so crappy that night from the hangover that I had, that weekend I wanted to do it all over again. But see, I would spend the next couple years looking for ways to figure out how to consume alcohol, but also looking for ways on how to manage and control my life. See, I prided myself on my smarts and my intellect. So when my family told me, if you just did good in school, if you would just get your act together, things would be so much better. So I believe them. I believe them that when I'm blowing up my life from all the drinking that I'm doing, that when they tell me that if I would just put down the drink for a couple of weeks, the life would get better. All of a sudden, the dishes got done, the laundry got done, and it got put away. But I didn't understand that what ends up happening in my mind is like a pressure cooker, that I can't leave it alone, no matter how great the necessity. I don't know that I'm suffering from alcoholism. See, I have a lot of old ideas about what alcoholism is because I grew up in a house with alcoholism. And see, I'm comparing my drinking to my dad's drinking, and I'm saying that's not it. I'm comparing my drinking to my uncle who died of this disease. to my cousin, his son, that would die to this disease. And I would say, well, that's not me because I haven't been to Alcoholics Anonymous. I haven't read your big blue book wrapped in a ribbon of promise to understand what it is that I suffer from. I just know that I have quite a bit of unmanageability in my life. I don't have relationships with people. I have reactionships. I don't know that scratch an alcoholic, find a codependent. I'm so focused on everybody else trying to fix, manage, and control because I don't want to look at myself. I don't want to take responsibility for me or how I feel. Because to deal with me, it just seems absolutely insane. So I go to college because I think I can wrest happiness and satisfaction out of this world if I can just manage well. If I appeal to that frothy emotional appeal, or my parents are telling me, if you go to college, your life will straighten out if you stop drinking. And again, my smarts, my intellect, not knowing I'm insane and I'm delusional and that I'm relying on my own human reasoning to try to deal with my own alcoholism. I started to jeopardize all my relationships, my finances, my health, my jobs. But I don't see that I'm the problem or that alcohol is the problem. So what ends up happening to me is after a few burnt down relationships, a divorce, graduating college, losing a job, quitting before they could fire me, still thinking that I can manage and control my drinking, not wanting to admit that I'm an alcoholic, all those things that our book talks about and more about alcoholism. Things that seem horrible the first time they happen, like getting arrested. The second time I end up in jail doesn't seem so horrible to me. I'm insane and I'm delusional and I have no idea. That father that moved down south of me here in New Jersey, he lives across the street from a beautiful lake. There's lifeguards in the summertime. The only normal life that I knew was to meet my dad and go on a bender for a couple of days with him. And this is the normal life that I had. On Thursday morning, I start my vacation. We meet at the liquor store at 9 a.m. by his house. We're going to enjoy a few drinks and we're going to go on the beach and we're going to swim and we're going to get liquored up. And that's normal to me. So we meet at the liquor store and at 9 a.m. we start drinking. And what's been happening to me is by 4 o'clock, I can no longer form words. I'm no longer going to stay awake for very much longer. And I'm getting upset and disappointed with myself and my behaviors that that I'm passed out. And I can't even enjoy the rest of the night drinking like everyone else. I wake up Friday morning again, 9 o'clock. Meet Dad at the liquor store and we're going to go to the beach. This was the day of my bottom, and I live life forwards, but I understand it backwards, and here's how God showed up in my life that day, even though I didn't think I had a God, didn't want a God, and definitely didn't think I needed a God. That beach opens up at 10 a.m. They do water quality checks beforehand. This is Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm going to leave it to the singleness of purpose, but what happens to me is because I'm getting tired of being passed out. I got paid that Friday morning, and I went out and got some non-conference approved materials and added that to my drinking. By 10 a.m., thank God that beach wasn't open due to quality checks, because I would have been sitting alone on that beach by myself, and I would have stopped breathing, and I would not be here with you today. Instead, what happened was on my dad's front porch while we proceeded to drink with each other, I ended up passing out and stopping breathing in front of him. Now, I'm my dad's only child, his little girl. Even though I'm a 45-year-old woman, I'm still his little girl. He doesn't know what's going on. He calls an ambulance and I get carted off, and in the state of New Jersey, whenever it's alcohol or drug related, they have a mandatory procedure here where they make you sit on a hospital bed for 6 hours and someone from behavioral health shows up. And again, here's how God showed up in my life that day. I had a good think for quite a few of those 6 hours. Like I've had a good think the day after suffering incomprehensible demoralization. I was scared and I was upset. My dad sat outside the door of that ward that I was in, and I could see him very upset through a little tiny window, but he was not allowed to come see me. I was really upset with myself. How did this happen? I never thought this would happen to me. And just like every other time, I'm wrapped up in self. And I don't know it. But a man from behavioral health broke his anonymity to me. And what he did was what our book says. He asked me questions about me and tried to get to know me. Then he proceeded to tell me about his story. He didn't show up telling me, Beth, you need to, you should, you got to do 90 meetings in 90 days. What he shared was his story, and I had a moment of clarity. I was really upset and afraid because I had really hurt my dad, and I knew that during those 6 hours that I sat in the hospital. I knew that I needed to go to meetings. See, I'd been in therapy for months because I was always trying to fix you. I'm not the problem. Why is everybody in my life, why is my mom so dramatic and chaotic? Why does my dad act like a complete, absurd guy when he's drinking? Everybody else needs to be fixed but me. And that therapist had suggested that I might need Alcoholics Anonymous. And like our book says, I spent a lot of money going to him, telling him that I was going to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I wasn't. He's still in my life today. I thought he believed the lie. I thought I was a good liar, and I was not. But what ends up happening is because that gentleman broke his anonymity and told me his story, I believed that I needed to get everybody else off my back, and I knew that I didn't know how to stay stopped on my own. I knew that when I got in the car with my dad and he drove me back to my house telling me that I needed rehab and I needed to be put away for a while, I knew that I needed to fix, manage, and control this situation, and that I was highly upset when he told me that he had called my mother. See, there's a lot of drama and chaos when you grow up in a home with an alcoholic and someone who's not mentally stable. And the family is to quite extent ill, our book says. But I don't know that. But I do know now, looking back, that self-centeredness is the root of our troubles. I almost died in front of my dad. He's got to be pretty scared. He's got to be pretty upset and sad to have watched that happen. But self-centeredness is the root of my troubles. I get in the car, and when he tells me that he's called my mother that he hasn't spoken to for 10 years, because you see, there's this resentment. My dad left my mom for a deaf woman after 30 years of marriage. I don't know how to deal with resentments. I wouldn't have even called it a resentment. I just knew I had a lot of anger from that. And that when my dad called my mom after not speaking for 10 years, what came out of me because of what I suffer from, the root of my troubles is that self-centeredness. And it became, how dare you? How dare you call her? But see, I don't know that what I'm really afraid of is that I'm afraid that the gig is up, that I've been found out now, that I can no longer con and manipulate my family into thinking that I'm okay. And that I'm having to deal with some hard truths, and I don't want to deal with them. The harder truth was my dad said, you cannot stay here for the weekend. You have to take your car and go home. And I thought, how dare you? There's no compassion, no empathy, no love and understanding, like our St. Francis prayer says. I'm just so caught up in the bondage of self and thinking, this is not fair. And that is the insanity of the disease. The insanity of the disease is that when I get in my car and I leave my dad's house, is that I don't know that what I suffer from is not only the allergy that once I put something into my body, I don't know if I'm going to have 3 drinks or 33 drinks. But even bigger, I have the mental obsession. These thoughts that start to hijack my mind without my permission. See, I think at 5 o'clock when I vowed that morning that I'm not going to drink, that I just changed my mind. But the truth is I have no power, choice, or control when these thoughts are going to hijack my mind. There cannot be a cloud in the horizon, as our book says, with that one story, and I may end up with that peculiar mental twist and have a drink in my hand. That day when I left my dad's house, the ego and the insanity in that moment of clarity I had in the hospital, The disease of alcoholism and the thought that hijacked my mind was, it's a good idea to stop at the liquor store. See, I have this belief in me that it can't happen again. I'm really not going to blow up my life again. One drink isn't going to hurt anything. And sometimes I don't even have those thoughts. So our book says in the doctor's opinion that I suffer from the allergy and that the only solution for the allergy is complete abstinence, to not use alcohol in any form at all, because once I put a drink into my body, all bets are off. See, I suffer from alcoholism, and that's what separates me from the normal drinker. See, I'm not a compulsive gambler. It never occurred to me to go down to my local convenience store and buy a whole bunch of lottery tickets. See, when I lose 20 bucks, I lose interest. But it does occur to me to go buy liquor, and that is what I suffer from. Our book goes on and it tells me that no matter how much of a desire to stop, that a desire to stop is not enough. I've had tons of desire over the years, especially after the 4 horsemen show up every day. But a desire to stop just earns me a seat in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's not enough. Our book tells me that self-knowledge, knowing that I'm an alcoholic, saying I'm Beth, I'm an alcoholic, it's not enough. It tells me that fear and consequences, that the suffering and humiliation of a week or a month ago, I will not be able to recall. I've just left the hospital. I've just had a near-death experience. I haven't been to AA. I haven't read how it works. I haven't read your ABCs. And I get that bottle and I drink on the way home. What I did do right that night, and this is what I call the gift of desperation for me, that God that I couldn't see, that I didn't know, is that I went to that meeting that night, and maybe I went to that meeting because I wanted everybody off my back. But what ended up happening in that meeting is you guys were responsible. Because, see, I was drinking it before I got to that meeting. I wasn't sober. That gentleman from that hospital had given me a few names and called a few women at that meeting to tell them to be on the lookout for me. But what ends up happening is I show up there, and with my alcoholism, all the men are wearing buttoned-up collared shirts with ties. I'm in a tank top, little shorts, and got a hospital bracelet on. And I'm insane, and I don't know it, but you guys loved me. A woman in the bathroom pulled me aside and said, "Come sit with me. And when they ask you to raise your hand and give your day count, I want you to say, you have a desire not to drink today." I did that. You guys loved me. You didn't kick me out. You didn't say, "Oh my God, let's shun her. She's a mess." Thank God for that. And you gave me a list of phone numbers that I was never going to call. Because, again, ego and pride had already rebuilt the moment I left my dad's house. But what ended up happening was I knew from that therapist and that I'd been going to for years, and that guy in the hospitals, that I needed a sponsor. And I was at least willing to ask for help to get one. And because that woman was responsible, she gave my number to another woman who had ended up calling me on Sunday. So this is a Friday at my first meeting. See, I wasn't going to call any of you. I've heard before, let's see how willing they are. If they really want it, they'll call me. Thank God that woman called me. God gave me the desperation to at least answer the phone call. And she did the work of, again, taking me through working with others as how she saw it from her experience. But I hadn't stopped drinking on Sunday when she called me. Monday morning rolls around and I have to go back to work. That sponsor had asked me to do a couple things, and one of them I definitely didn't like. She asked me if I could make a meeting. Sure, no problem. She asked me if I could call her on Monday. Absolutely. She asked me if I could if I could pray and ask a power greater than me to keep me sober. And I said, absolutely not. God has never done anything for me. No freaking way. And she said, Beth, I don't care what you believe. I don't care who your God is. I'm just asking you to take some action. Believe in my God if you need to. We get to define what our God looks like, and it doesn't have to be that God that you've been used to. But believe that I believe that if you ask, you've got a better chance. So I wake up Monday morning, for the first time, I asked a God that I didn't understand to help keep me sober. And when I showed up to work, I didn't realize the debacle I'd been creating for the 2 years that I'd been at that company. And looking backwards, I understand that God maybe needed to take one more thing for me in order for me to surrender and say, my way doesn't work. And I don't even know what surrender means at that point. But when they threatened to fire me and told me all the chaos that I had created that I couldn't see, I called that sponsor that I'd had for one day. And I said, I'm willing to do whatever it takes because I can't go on like this. I took a lot of actions that I didn't like and that I didn't understand. I began praying in the morning to a God that I didn't know that I had. I began reading spiritual literature. I got myself a 24-hour-a-day book, The Daily Meditations. I didn't always relate to it, and some days I did. I started making meetings. She told me to build a network of women. She started having me call women. So when you gave me that meeting list, I had to call and say, hi, how are you? And she said, do not talk about yourself. Because, see, that's the problem. I spend way too much time thinking about me. And I don't know that that's the problem. But she opens up the big book with me, and we begin to understand. Step one, that I admitted that I'm powerless over alcohol, that I have that allergy. We begin to align my own experience to it. And that no matter how great the necessity, I've got a mind that's going to keep bringing me back to that drink, that's just going to hijack my thoughts, that I've got peculiar mental twists, and that on my own power, I'm going to be doomed to drink again. There's no good news in step one, and I really learned how doomed I am from aligning my own experience. I thought at first that the unmanageability was when I was drinking. Turns out that's drunkenness. The unmanageability for me is really those things that we lift on page 52 in those bedevilments that I'm going to read. We're having trouble with personal relationships, so I thought, I'm not in a relationship. But the trouble with personal relationships for me can be that I like to feel superior or inferior to you. That I'm always looking to rise above and have some kind of judgment against you, to create a resentment around it. That I'm scared of what you think of me often, or I'm trying to prove my value. That we couldn't control our emotional natures. Well, I don't know how to respond. I've been spending 40 years of my life reacting. That we were prey to misery and depression. Well, I don't even want to deal with me and get at the root of the problem. And I'm really hard on myself, and I don't even know that. That we couldn't make a living. Well, I thought, oh, I'm still employed. Well, I don't take constructive criticism well. That I see rejection from my boss where no one else sees it. That we had a feeling of uselessness. Until I did my 4-step, I couldn't tell you that the underlying fears that drive my defects of character, what I call defenses, are because I'm afraid that I'm not enough, that I'm not loved. I'm afraid I'm going to be abandoned. There's tons of fears that drive my defenses in this world. That we were full of fear. Well, I'm afraid of even my own humanness. What makes me an alcoholic is that alcohol cures my humanness. What I suffer from is the human imperfection. And a great book to read is that Spirituality of Imperfection. This yearning to master my own destiny, to be the God of my own life. See, when you're in harmony with the story that I tell myself, I have lots of peace. But when you have opinions and share things with me and give me advice that I haven't asked for, my hair lights on fire. I only see my past in the present. I've never once thought about inspecting where my thoughts come from. I've believed everything that I think. Who I am is often dependent upon how you're treating me, or how I think you're supposed to be treating me, how you're supposed to behave. I erroneously believe that my emotional well-being is somehow dependent on what's happening or what's not happening. That I can't differentiate the true from the false. That I don't respond to reality as it's manifesting. I just react to how it's manifesting. I never grew up emotionally. And so I begin to uncover, discover, and discard what the unmanageability for my life is. And in We Agnostics, it talks about sometimes that I've worshipped my feelings. I've worshipped the flower, I've worshipped the moon. When things are good, great. But it's like every morning I promise to get up and go to the gym at 7 a.m. when I join on January 1st. And then I get up at 7 a.m. and every day I say, I don't feel like it. And isn't that a lot about how my alcoholism has been? Is I judge myself on how I feel on whether or not I want to take certain actions because I am God. I'm going to make those decisions on my own because self-reliance is what I go to, my human reasoning. And the book tells me that when I get to step 2, the lack of power is my dilemma, but I've been seeking power everywhere. I'm seeking power over you. I'm seeking power to master my own destiny. Harry Tiebout in AA Comes of Age says, the alcoholic is the narcissistic, egocentric core. When I read that, I went, oh my God, I've been called a narcissist by my family before. I want to master my own universe. I want to master your universe because I think I know how you should behave. I've got this should monster in my head. I should, they should, the world should. And I've been shooting all over the place for 40 years because I think I know how everything should be. And that is the insanity that lays in this mind of mine, that I want to play God. He also says, Harry Tiebout, omnipotent. I am God, bigger than life. I want to master my own destiny. I don't want to surrender to it when things happen in life. I just want to show up and play the victim to it. Ultimate insanity is that I have to, lack of power is my dilemma, and I need a God of my understanding to restore me to sanity. And I get to step 3, made a decision to turn my will and my life over to a God of my understanding. And I begin to read 61 to the prayer in first person. And that begins to resonate with me. Life would be wonderful if you just got the memo in the morning on what your lines are when interacting with me. Then I could be happy. See, I'm the actor, but I want to be the director of the show. I want you to drive faster. Don't you know who I am when I'm in the fast lane? How dare you go the speed limit? That I think I can wrest happiness and satisfaction out of this world if I just manage well. I've had a lot of things come up lately for me where I've made a mistake. I make a lot of mistakes at work, and it's like a replay of the same things that happen in my head. But recently I made a mistake on not making a meeting at work, right? I'm on Eastern time, the Central time, Mountain time, Pacific time. I wrote down the time wrong. And the message in my head, instead of I fell short, was I made this faulty written down the time. I made it into a really big deal in my own mind. That somehow that I didn't show up to that meeting and write it down on time says something about who I am. Ego, the bondage of self that third step talks about, says that I can never make a mistake. The third step says that I operate from 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. Well, the delusion that I was in was that I should be above making that kind of mistake. The illusion is that if I never make a mistake, that I'll be perfect, as if somehow I'll rise to perfection. The illusion and the delusion, this fantasy thinking, tells me that if I never do anything wrong, I'll be okay. the security in my third column of my fourth step. See, I'm the victim of the delusion that I can wrest happiness and satisfaction out of this world if I just manage well. And I compare my life to that Hallmark card, which is completely insane. And so I take that back to myself instead of saying, just because I make a mistake doesn't make me a mistake. And so I have to ask God in that moment. And it's almost like a 6 and 7 when I have awareness of that story playing, to have the humility in step 7 to go to God and say, even if I made a mistake, I am still lovable. But I have to do that work in that 4th step. What that 4th step reveals to me is some truths. The underlying conditions, how self has defeated me, how I show up to life without God in it, how I show up to life when Beth is running the show, and it's not pretty. I'll talk a little bit about my mom and what that 4th step looks like. I love what Bill wrote, the self-esteem, the pride, the ambition, the security, the personal relationships. My mom is not capable of being the mom that I wish her to be. I'm getting married in a couple weeks. And I've known throughout my life that my mom has had some mental illness in her life. But I'm an alcoholic, and I'm always looking for my mom to be someone that she's not. I used to try to fix, manage, and control all of my mom's problems. It used to just make me angry and resentful. There's this little triangle I like to think about whenever I'm in anger, fear, or guilt, that there's nothing good that's going to come out of my mouth. I'm just going to spin around that triangle of anger, fear, and guilt, going from one to the other. See, I'm afraid that I'm not a great daughter, and that's how it affects my self-esteem. I have this should monster that's really pride. My mom should be able to show up at my wedding. My mom should be able to behave herself and be there for her on an important day for me. Ambition. I want my mom to be a mom and to be there for her daughter. So in Bill's emotional sobriety letter, it talks about these faulty emotional dependencies where I demand possession and control of you. You need to make me feel good about me in order for me to feel okay. I have a mind that has these false ideas, these old ideas and beliefs about what a mom should be. I go through this work and I begin to see how I've been playing God in my mom's life. See, I play God wanting my mom to be someone that she's not. I will use anger to manipulate my mom to try to get her to treat me right. See, I also valued being a victim because she could do better. Should do better. That's shoulding again. That personal relationship, that the old idea and belief that moms are supposed to be dependable. Well, I'm really afraid that I won't be loved and cared for. So fear drives these defects of character with my mom. They activate them. And I couldn't see that my mom lives in her own personal hell. That my mom lives in a really dark, scary cave. I used to go in that dark, scary cave and try to rescue her. It never worked. Today I get to stand outside that dark, scary cave, and I get to be the light. And if she wants to come, I'm right there with the light waiting for her. But I gotta see that my mom plays a really scary movie in her head where her like me, they like ourselves, our book says. My mom operates from 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity, just like me, only she's not gonna drink over it. My mom just wants to be loved, so she acts out just like I've acted out, still even today, in sobriety, because I have a desire to want to be valued, loved, felt like enough. Only today I get to be awake and aware to that, Today I have the tools of the program to use that. My mom doesn't have these tools. My dad and my mom have been in conflict even with that phone call when I left that hospital. I would like them both to be at my wedding, and I have to make a decision. But see, alcoholism or the ego shows up, and I know that I have to make a decision on who I want at my wedding. And if I invite my mom to the wedding, that there may be some conflict and drama because that's what my mom brings. My mom can't stand my dad. My mom definitely hates his wife. How dare you leave me for a deaf woman, is what my mother has said. She's in a lot of pain. She's not able to let go of the past, just like I couldn't. But I have to make a decision, and I have to weigh the lesser of two evils. If my mom comes to my wedding, does that ruin my day? If I don't invite my mom, there's going to be some hell to pay for that. And see, this alcoholic mind says, I want to find one set of decisions that's not going to make me uncomfortable, that's not going to cause me any pain. Because I'm a relief-seeking missile. I want to feel comfortable all the time. I don't like discomfort, and I don't like pain. And that is the disillusion, the reality that I'm trying to move away from. And I cannot fight reality because reality is going to win. I have to make a decision, and it's not going to be comfortable. I made the decision to invite my mom. And I said, listen, I would love for you to be there, but I know you have some conflict with my dad, and I'm giving you a way out. I didn't say that, but I said, if you don't feel comfortable, it's okay. I know you love me. I didn't get the response I wanted. She screamed at me. She said some pretty nasty things like she's done in the past. I have to remember that what comes up for me when somebody else is taking their stuff out on me, that it has nothing to do with me. I can take that real personally, and I have. And if I'm not spiritually centered, I will take it personally. But I get real spiritually centered before I talk to my mom, because I know that I want things to be able to ping off me instead of reacting to her. That I have the old idea and belief that when my mom doesn't show up the way I think she should, that says something about who I am. It does not. And when I'm spiritually centered and I'm connected to a power greater than me, where I know that God loves me, and that is the only thing that I need to seek, is not my mom's love, my boss's love, my boss's value. When I get right sized and what kind of whose love I need, I begin to know who I am. Then I'm not tossed around by my mom or this world all the time. See, people are just saying things because it's a reflection of who they are, not a reflection of me. It's like, Glenn, if you said to me, hey, Beth, I hate your green hair, I'm like, ha, 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 Glenn, I don't have green hair. But if Carol steps in and says, Carol says, hey, Beth, you put on 10 pounds. Well, I believe I put on 10 pounds, so I'm going to be like, screw you, Carol. I got to watch those old ideas and beliefs that are buried in me. I was always avoiding looking at that stuff. Today I know what those buttons are that other people can be pushed in me. Because our book talks about self-seeking, or what the therapeutic community might call people-pleasing, I call myself a self-seeking approval addiction junkie. A few weeks after my mom saying no, I still wanted my mom to feel included, because I didn't realize that I was in that place where I just want my mom to love me and know that I want her to know I love her. So I asked her if she'd like to come over and see some dresses I'm going to try on and sign my marriage certificate. A few hours before signing my marriage certificate, my mom called me and said that she can't make it. She made everything all about her. And I went into panic, because now I've got to find somebody to come over that morning and sign the marriage certificate. And I wanted to go into the victim because my mom can't show up for me. How dare she? But I'm awake and aware to that. Instead of listening to my feelings and getting into the self-pity, I have to go to God, even if to have that prayer of humility, even if my mom can't be there for me. I am lovable, even if. And then I take the right actions and I call someone. And I forget, I've got a huge family in AA. I've got moms, I've got dads, I've got uncles, I've got brothers, I've got sisters here in this program. But alcoholism wants to say, oh my God, your mom's not going to be there for you. Because I think things should look a certain way. And the truth is God has a different plan for me today. And when I accept reality and surrender to it, I get to peace a lot quicker than I used to. So today I'm not caught up in the old idea of what that wedding is supposed to look like. My dad's real sick with cancer, just had surgery, keeps coming out and having infections. And then his wife, her eye, she got shipped off to Philadelphia Wills Eye Hospital, was vomiting so badly they removed her retina, and they may not be able to show up at my wedding. And she's my photographer. I can go into self real quick. I can also make a story about, wow, none of my family is going to be there for me. That must say something about how lovable I am. But I'm very aware of the insane thoughts today, that the ego tries to prove that I'm a nobody, or rises up and tries to prove that I'm a somebody when I'm talking to you. I can get on Facebook real quick and see somebody on an AA page saying, well, that's not right, you're doing that wrong. And all of a sudden, I feel that emotional rise in me because I've got alcoholism, the black and white thinking. I'm full of opinions, which I try not to express today because I am not God, and you have the right to be wrong, our traditions say. I try to stay right-sized amongst all God's kids today. But I've got to be awake and aware because I've got an ego, the self-talking mind that's negative, opinionated about myself and others, judgmental. Today, it's how can I judge one of my brothers or sisters when God is looking back at me through those eyes that I'm judging? But I've got to stay awake to that. It's got to be a practice. This program didn't happen to me overnight, and I still have to treat alcoholism the day that I'm in. My defects of character, what I call these defenses, they show up and sometimes they wear different colored shirts so that I don't recognize them. And this is why when we read that opening with the daily read, it talks about honesty. I've got to stay open and honest with my network and let them know where I'm at. I continue to write out my 10 steps. I continue in the morning to do as our 11th step says, to pray. As I go throughout my day to bring God in, how would God have me be? Thy will, not mine, be done. God, where am I trying to take your job away from you? Where am I not responding to reality right now? And I sit down at night and I write out those 11-step questions and I see where God wasn't working in my life. What corrective measures do I need to take? What did I put into the stream of life? What can I do better? Not to be a critic to myself, which still goes on at times. Because see, if I'm judgmental and critical of myself, I'm going to be judgmental and critical of you. For me, the golden rule is that I do to myself what I do to others. And so that is why I do this process, and I go out and I make those amends to all those people that I've harmed, so that I don't believe that I'm that bad person, but that I did the best that I could to right all those wrongs that God would have me do, so that I can live peacefully in life with this head in mind, and so that I can go out and sponsor other women and share my experience who think like me, because God never puts two people together to help just one of them. But sometimes that mirror is so close to my nose, I cannot see how that defect is showing up. And so I need to be open and honest with the women in my network to allow them to help me see the truth about myself sometimes when I can't see it, because self can't fix self. I have the disease of alcoholism. I'm not saying my thoughts are as horrible as they used to be. They're a lot better. But I need you. If I could wrest happiness and satisfaction out of this world and just manage well, I wouldn't be sitting here and coming to a meeting to be with you. I certainly wouldn't be showing up to Alcoholics Anonymous, working these steps and sponsoring other women if I could manage my life well. The gift is that I get these big islands of peace today. Sometimes I go for a swim, but I don't go for that swim as long as I used to. Today I have these big islands of peace where I intuitively know how to handle situations in life, where I'm not showing up and reacting. I'm learning how to respond. I'm walking the dog a couple months ago. She poops. My finger goes through the poop bag, and I've got poop on my finger. I'm upset, and I just want to get home. I never, because I'm so good, I never throw that bag into another person's trash can. I bring it home with me. But on this day, I threw it in a trash can as I'm walking the dog. A woman gets out of her car on the phone and starts screaming at me, "How dare you?" And that's so disrespectful. And I felt that emotional rise cropping up through my esophagus where Beth is going to unleash Beth. But I'm aware, fear, anger, guilt, that triangle. And I have that pause button. Now, my first question to her is that your trash can? And it was not. That emotional rise where I can right-size her in this moment. Not even your trash can. You get out screaming at me all entitled on your phone. And I went, that is not a spiritual principle that we try to live by. Practicing these principles in all my affairs. In that moment, that's 6 and 7, because I believe it's right at the heart of our steps for a reason. In that moment, God, I'm going to need you for help for a new perspective. I'm going to need help, principles over Beth's personality right now. Instead, the next thought out of my mouth was, do you want me to go pick it up? She said no. She proceeded to be on the phone telling me, how dare I, and who do I think? I believe today that when I'm willing to seek God, that I have moments of peace, that God is flying the plane that I'm in, and he will lift me up above that turbulence to still air where I can have peace. He doesn't promise me that when he lands the plane, that I'm not going to go through more turbulence. But I continue to seek God. That woman, I walked by her house today, her trash can is blown over once again, and now there's a ton of White Claws out on the lawn. Maybe one day I'll see her in AA. But I didn't spoil an opportunity to be helpful. That's the miracle. And to close, my sponsor had me do an exercise that was really helpful when I said, well, I don't understand what God is supposed to do for me. It's in our big book. And there's hundreds of them, and I'm just going to read a few. On page 55, Beth is spiritually liberated from this world and rises above her problems because God makes it possible. So when I have a problem, I remember that God's flying that plane and is going to make it possible. On page 63, Beth is an employee of an all-powerful God who provides what she needs if she keeps close to him and performs his work well. Page 67, Beth is helped by God to show how to take a kindly and tolerant view of each and every one. I don't have the power to take a kindly and tolerant view of each and every one, but God will help me. Page 70, Beth is reliant on God for ideals, guidance, questionable situations, sanity, and for strength to do the right thing. That says I don't have to figure out that problem that's in front of me. I just got to rely and keep asking. Page 72, Beth is in a new relationship with her Creator and has a new attitude because her troubles have been cast out when she relies on him. Do I believe when I have troubles that they can be cast out when I stay in reliance instead of defiance? Page 79, Beth is given strength and direction to do the right thing, no matter what the personal consequences. I always used to think that I can't trust my mouth. Today I have a little bit more trust in my mouth because I'm awake and aware. Page 85, Beth receives strength, inspiration, direction from him who has all knowledge and power. His spirit is within her. My sponsor had said to me when I said I thought I was missing the God piece, she says, Beth, you're not missing anything. Deep down inside each and every one of us is the fundamental idea of some type of God. It doesn't have to be the God of your childhood. There's 26 other words in our book for God, and creator of the universe, spiritual intelligence, whatever it is. But she said, you're not missing it. What we teach you in Alcoholics Anonymous is how to get in touch with the God piece. This book outlines what God does for me when I'm willing to seek it. Page 89, Beth is dependent on God rather than other people. I don't want to be a self-sucking approval addiction junkie anymore. I want to be God reliant. I want to go to God for my self-esteem. I want to have God confidence and God esteem instead of using this brain and making demands on you to make me feel good about myself. To make demands about how my wedding should look. When I'm staying awake and aware and trying to connect and bring God in throughout my day, I have a much better chance of staying peaceful. In the days that I'm having a hard time, I reach out to one of you, and maybe you'll share about your God with me, and maybe that'll help me. But I intuitively know how to handle situations like with that woman in the garbage can. I have big islands of peace. That is the miracle of it. Thank you for having me.